It's Professor Dave. Let's talk about Passato Remoto.
He knows a lot about all kinds of stuff. Professor Dave explains.
We've learned about a number of different past tenses, so let's take a moment to clarify some things. First, let's recall that passato remoto, or the past absolute, just like passato prossimo, or the simple past, is a narrative tense, which describes an action completed in the past. This tense is definitely different from the imperfect, which is a descriptive tense regarding a state of being, describing intentions or habitual actions in the past. This tense would answer questions like, what was happening? What used to happen? Avevo mal di testa. Pioveva e faceva freddo. Dovevo uscire. Instead, passato remoto describes an action that happened in the past, is completely over, and is not related to the present. This tense will be used to answer the question, what happened? Alla fine, Ottaviano sconfisse definitivamente Pompeo. Napoleone andò in esilio all'Elba. Now, you might say that Italian already has a tense that describes completed actions, the passato prossimo. So let's see why there is another one. First, the word remoto, from Latin removeo, which means to move back, seems to indicate that the action in question is farther away than passato prossimo, which comes from the Latin proximus, or very recent. But that is only partly true, and the use of these two tenses is a little more complicated than this. The truth is that this tense is highly irregular, and even Italians don't like to use passato remoto in speech, no matter how far the past is, with the exception of southern Italy, where this tense is used dialectically in colloquial speaking. But that's just for speaking. Despite what you may have heard, passato remoto is still used frequently in written Italian, provided that the action is completely finished and bears no effect on the present. Students should tend to use passato prossimo in conversation, but still be familiar with passato remoto in order to understand it and recognize it in literature, articles, or anywhere else the written language can be found. You may even opt to use it occasionally when speaking. Let's look at some sentences using either of the past tenses and highlight the reasons they qualify for using one tense over the other. Vado a letto perché la notte scorsa non ho dormito. This has consequence in the present, hence passato prossimo. Quella volta dormii per 12 ore di seguito. This is a completely finished action, passato remoto. Dante Alighieri ha scritto la poesia che dovete imparare a memoria. This has consequences in the present, since you currently have to memorize this poem. Dante Alighieri scrisse la Divina Commedia a Firenze all'inizio del 1300. This is a completely finished action. Luigi è sempre vissuto a Venezia. He has always lived there and still does, so there are consequences in the present. Luigi visse a Venezia per 10 anni. He lived there, but he doesn't anymore, so this action is finished. Unfortunately, the endings for passato remoto are the most difficult to learn in the entire indicative mood. Let's go through all the forms for 3 verbs, 1 per conjugation, starting with parlare. Io parlai. Tu parlasti. Lui parlò. Noi parlammo. Voi parlaste. Loro parlarono. Notice the accent in the third person singular and the double M in the first person plural. Now for credere. Io credei o credetti. Tu credesti. Lui o lei credè o credette. Noi credemmo. Voi credeste. Loro crederono or credettero. Lastly, for finire. Io finii. Tu finisti. Lui o lei finì. Noi finimmo. Voi finiste. Loro finirono. As if these endings weren't enough, there are many verbs that have highly irregular forms. Here we list all of the forms for the verbs avere, essere, dare, stare, dire, and fare. These are the common irregular verbs we are familiar with, and you can refer to this list should you need to use any of these verbs in Passato Remoto. But there are many other irregular verbs in this tense, and it will be easier to remember them knowing that most of them follow a 1-3-3 pattern, like chiedere, shown here. Chiesi, chiese, and chiesero are forms that will look similar to most of the other irregular verbs. Once you have these, you should be able to figure out the rest of the conjugation from the infinitive stem. For example, with accendere, accesi, accendesti, accese, accendemmo, accendeste, accessero. Now let's go through a list of verbs, display the first and second person singular forms in Passato Remoto, and then use one of the 6 forms in a sentence. Accogliere, accolsi, accogliesti. Ci accolsero cordialmente. Appendere, appesi, appendesti. Appesero il cappotto e il cappello. Bere, bevvi, bevesti. Bevemmo 2 o 3 birre. Conoscere, conobbi, conoscesti. Lo conobbi a Venezia. Chiudere, chiusi, chiudesti. Mi chiuse la porta in faccia. Correre, corsi, corresti. Corsero dietro l'autobus, ma lo persero. Crescere, crebbi, crescesti. Crebbe molto in fretta. Cuocere, cossi, cuocesti. Il sugo cosse tutto il giorno. Decidere, decisi, decidesti. Decisi di rimanere a casa perché era freddo. Leggere, lessi, leggesti. Leggemmo libri durante l'estate. Mettere, misi, mettesti. Poi mise un po' di paprika nella carne. mordere, morsi, mordesti. Il cane lo morse sulla gamba. Nascere, nacqui, nascesti. A quel tempo abitavo a Roma, così i miei figli nacquero là. Nascondere, nascosi, nascondesti. Nascosero i soldi sopra l'armadio. Piacere, piacqui, piacesti. La trippa non mi piacque per niente. Prendere, presi, prendesti. Io presi la metropolitana, ma voi prendeste un taxi. Ridere, risi, ridesti. Non risi mai così tanto in vita mia. Rimanere, rimasi, rimanesti. Noi rimanemmo alzati fino a mezzanotte. Rompere, ruppi, rompesti. Il bambino ruppe il giocattolo nuovo. Sapere, seppi, sapesti. Non lo seppi fino alla fine dell'estate. Scrivere, scrissi, scrivesti. È l'ultima volta in cui mi scrisse. Vedere, vidi, vedesti. Eravamo tutti lì, ma lui non ci vide. Venire, venni, venisti. Vennero tardi. Volere, volli, volesti. Lei non volle venire. And that's it for Passato Remoto. Remember, in speaking Italian, this tense is completely optional, and in fact, rarely used. So although it is a bonus that this tense doesn't require an auxiliary verb, if you just don't feel like memorizing these strange endings, you can probably just skip it. But if you plan to read Italian literature or do some writing, you will certainly find this tense useful. And now you know what it means, so be brave and go read some Dante. But first things first, let's check comprehension. Thanks for watching, guys. Subscribe to my channel for more tutorials. Support me on Patreon so I can keep making content. And as always, feel free to email me, ProfessorDaveExplains@gmail.com.